A dramatic African scene at sunset. A young, brave female mechanic with grease-stained hands and determined eyes, standing next to a broken luxury SUV on a dusty rural road. Vibrant African village in the background, warm golden sunlight, soft shadows, cinematic, emotional, high detail, rich colors, realistic textures, hopeful and inspiring mood. Focus on the mechanic's strength and courage. African storytelling vibe. In the heart of the great city, where buildings touch the sky and roads shined like mirrors, lived a man people called Charles Okoye. They said his name with respect. Some said it with fear. Some said it with envy. Charles had everything a man could count. Houses that slept in different cities. Cars that smelled of leather and power. Money that spoke before his voice ever did. But every night, when the lights went off and the world grew quiet, peace refused to visit his room. Charles would sit alone by the wide glass window of his penthouse, looking down at the city he owned but never felt. Below him, horns cried, people rushed, and life moved like a restless river. He sighed. "What is all this for?" He whispered to the glass, but the glass never answered. His phone rang without rest. Deals, meetings, profits, losses, numbers fighting numbers, voices asking for more. One night, his assistant's voice came through the phone. "Sir, congratulations. The land deal in the rural region has been approved. This one will double the company's value." Charles closed his eyes slowly. "Good," he said. "Prepare the documents." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. A memory rose like smoke. A small boy, barefoot, a dusty road, a mother's tired smile. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. "Past is past," he told himself. But the past does not listen. Charles had grown from nothing. Hunger had once been his neighbor. Shame had once known his name. He promised himself that poverty would never touch him again. And it didn't. But in running away from hunger, he had also run away from joy. His marriage had broken quietly, like a calabash dropped at night. No noise. No witnesses. Just cracks that never healed. His children lived far away, speaking to him through short calls and polite words. "Are you okay, Dad?" "Yes," he would lie. "I am fine." Yet his chest felt heavy, like something important was missing. That night, he poured himself a drink but did not touch it. He stood there, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. "You have one," he said to himself. "But why do you feel defeated?" Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The city lights blinked, unaware. Charles did not know it yet, but life was preparing a journey for him, away from comfort, away from control, and toward a road where money would lose its voice. A road where peace would test him. He turned off the light and walked to his bed, carrying wealth in his hands and emptiness in his heart. And somewhere far beyond the city, fate was already waiting for him. The journey had not begun yet, but the road was calling. Morning came softly, but it did not greet Charles with peace. The sun rose over the city like gold poured into the sky. Birds sang on balconies. Cars hummed awake. Everything looked blessed. Yet Charles felt restless. He stood by his car that morning, a black machine that shined like authority. His driver opened the door politely. "Sir, the meeting is in the capital. We should leave early to avoid traffic." Charles paused. "No," he said slowly. "I want to drive today." The driver hesitated. "Sir, the road." "I said I will drive." They both knew what he meant. Not the highway. Not the smooth road rich men used. Charles wanted the old rural road, the one that cut through forgotten villages, broken bridges, and long silence. The driver swallowed his words and stepped back. "As you wish, sir." The car moved away from the city, leaving glass buildings behind. The road slowly changed its face. Smooth tar became rough skin. Tall buildings turned into trees. Billboards disappeared, replaced by hand-painted signs and dry fields. Charles loosened his tie. The air felt different here. Honest, dusty, heavy with memory. He passed women carrying water on their heads, children waving without knowing who he was, old men sitting under trees with time in their hands. His chest tightened. "I used to walk roads like this," he whispered. The car bounced as it hit potholes. The engine complained softly. "Don't fail me now," Charles muttered. The road stretched endlessly ahead, lonely and patient. No traffic. No shortcuts. Just land and sky walking together. Then, croak. The sound tore the silence. The car shook. Smoke rose like bad news. Charles slammed the brakes and stepped out. The engine coughed once, then died. He stared at it, disbelief painted on his face. "No, not here." He checked his phone. No signal. Just empty bars staring back at him. The sun climbed higher. Sweat formed on his forehead. His expensive shoes sank into the dust. Charles laughed, a short, dry laugh. "So this is how it feels," he said. Stranded. Hours passed slowly. No cars. No people. Only wind brushing tall grass like whispers. Hunger knocked softly at his stomach. Fear followed. For the first time in years, money could not speak for him. He sat on the car's hood, head in his hands. "Is this punishment?" he asked the sky. "Or a lesson?" In the distance, a sound rose. Clank, clank, clank. Metal. Tools. Charles looked up. A small figure appeared on the road, pushing a bicycle, tools tied to its back. Dust covered the man's clothes. His hands were dark with oil. His face held calm lines carved by hardship. The man stopped a few steps away and greeted him gently. "Good afternoon, sir." Charles stood slowly. "My car broke down," he said, his voice softer than usual. The mechanic smiled faintly. "This road breaks many things," he replied. "Cars and pride." Charles felt the words land deep. Hope stirred, small, fragile, but alive. He did not know yet that this meeting, on this road no rich man wanted to travel, would open a door his money never could. The mechanic bent toward the engine. "Let me see what the problem is," he said. And as he opened the hood, fate leaned closer, listening. The sky changed its mind without warning. One moment it was calm and wide, the next it grew dark, like a face hiding anger. Clouds gathered slowly, heavy and low, pressing down on the land. The mechanic was still bent over the open engine. He said quietly. "This problem is not small." Charles watched him work. Oil-stained hands moved with care, not fear. No rushing. No showing off. "You think it can be fixed?" Charles asked. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag and looked up at the sky. "If the rain waits," he said. "Yes." As if the sky heard him, thunder rolled far away, deep and warning. Charles felt a chill crawl up his spine. The wind picked up, lifting dust into the air. Leaves ran across the road like scared animals. "We should hurry," Charles said. The mechanic nodded, but before he could return to the engine. Crack! Thunder split the sky, closer this time. Rain fell suddenly, not gently, but hard. Big drops slapped the ground, raising the smell of wet earth. Within seconds, the road turned dark and slippery. The mechanic stepped back. "This storm will not allow work," he said calmly. Charles stood frozen, rain soaking his expensive shirt, water running down his face. His hair stuck to his forehead. His shoes filled with mud. For the first time in many years, he had no umbrella, no assistant, no place to hide. They ran together toward a small roadside shelter made of old wood and rusted tin. The roof rattled as rain attacked it. They stood there, side by side. Silence settled between the sound of rain and thunder. Charles breathed heavily. "I had meetings today," he said suddenly, almost angrily. "Big ones. Decisions worth millions." The mechanic looked at him. "The rain does not know millions," he replied gently. "It knows only time." Lightning flashed, lighting Charles's face, tired, lined, human. Charles laughed softly, shaking his head. "All my life," he said, "I ran faster than storms. I paid them to stay away." The mechanic smiled. "And today?" "Today," Charles whispered, "the storm caught me." Rain poured harder. Water crept across the ground, inch by inch. The mechanic reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He broke it in half without thinking. "Eat," he said, offering it. Charles hesitated. The bread was rough, simple, not the kind served in his houses. But hunger spoke louder than pride. He took it. "Thank you," he said, chewing slowly. They ate in silence as the storm raged. Charles listened to the rain, the thunder, the beating of his own heart. He realized something painful. This road did not care who he was. This storm did not bow. This moment did not respect his name. And yet, inside that small shelter, with a poor mechanic and half a piece of bread, Charles felt something he had not felt in years. Stillness. When the rain began to slow, the mechanic stood. "The storm has passed," he said. "Now we can continue." Charles looked at him with new eyes. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "You don't even know my name." The mechanic smiled, rain dripping from his chin. "I know enough," he said. "You are a man stuck on the road." He turned back toward the car. Charles followed, heart heavy but awake. Behind them, the storm moved away. Ahead of them, something waited, quiet, unseen, and ready to change everything. The rain left the land shining, like it had washed secrets from the road. Water dripped from the trees. Birds returned, shaking their feathers. The air smelled fresh, alive. The mechanic knelt beside the car again. He did not complain. He did not 90. Complain? He did not ask for payment. He did not ask who Charles was. He only worked. His hands moved with courage, not strength. They were rough hands, cut by years of metal and hunger, but they were steady. Every bolt he touched with respect, like the car was alive. Charles watched quietly. "What is your name?" he asked. "Samuel," the mechanic replied, without looking up. "Samuel," Charles repeated, tasting the name. "How long have you been doing this work?" Samuel smiled faintly. "Since my father died," he said. "This road became my school." Charles swallowed. "And this road feeds you?" Samuel nodded. "Some days, yes. Some days, no. But I thank God for both." The engine made a soft sound as Samuel adjusted something deep inside. Charles leaned closer. "You could be working in the city," he said. "There is money there." Samuel laughed, not bitter, not loud. "There is money," he said. "But there is also forgetting." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "My mother lives in the village," he continued. "My younger sisters too. If I leave this road, who will help them?" Charles felt something tighten in his chest. The man before him had nothing, yet carried responsibility like a crown. A tool slipped. Samuel's hand scraped against sharp metal. Blood appeared, bright and quick. "Ah," Samuel whispered. Charles stepped forward. "You're bleeding." Samuel smiled again, calm as ever. Hands that work must bleed sometimes. He wrapped a cloth around it and returned to the engine. Charles shook his head slowly. In all his life, no one had worked for him while bleeding. Minutes passed. Sweat, oil, patience, and prayer mixed together. Then, vroom. The engine spoke again, alive. Samuel stepped back. "It will move now," he said. Charles stared. "You fixed it?" Samuel nodded. "Yes, but drive gently. This road remembers everything." Charles laughed softly, a sound full of relief and wonder. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick roll of money, and held it out. "Please," he said, "take this." Samuel looked at the money. Then he pushed it back. "Pay me what the work is worth," he said, "not what your name can buy." Charles froze. No one had ever refused his money before. "How much?" he asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "Enough to buy food for my family this week." Charles counted carefully and handed it to him. Samuel accepted it with a nod. "Thank you." As Charles got into his car, he looked back at Samuel. "May I see you again?" he asked. Samuel smiled. "The road will decide," he said. Charles drove off slowly. In his mirror, he watched Samuel grow smaller, then disappear. But the weight Samuel left in his heart grew heavier. And somewhere deep inside, something old and forgotten began to wake up, something called purpose. The night had settled like a heavy blanket over the village road. Darkness hid every tree, every pothole, every lonely stretch of earth. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the smell of wet soil and the faint hint of firewood from distant homes. Charles sat in his car, the engine silent, his thoughts louder than the storm that had passed. He had never felt so powerless. Wealth, power, influence, none of it could fix the engine. And yet, somewhere on this small, unknown road, hope was waiting. A single light appeared in the distance. A small pickup, its headlights cutting through the darkness like two searching eyes. The driver slowed and stopped. A young woman stepped out, her clothes damp, hair plastered to her face. She carried nothing but her hands, strong and steady. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft, but full of certainty. Charles nodded, though he barely believed his ears. The woman's eyes held no fear, no judgment, only kindness. "I can help," she said. "But it is late, and my workshop is locked. You cannot wait in the car. Come with me." Charles looked at her, hesitating. The world he knew was full of calculated moves, but here was a stranger offering safety, warmth, and a solution. "Will you trust me?" she asked, a small, almost playful smile on her lips. He nodded again. The drive to her home was short, yet it felt like a journey through another world. Her home was simple, walls of mud and stone, warm light spilling from the windows. Smoke curled from a small kitchen fire. The door opened, and the smell of cooked food filled the night. "You must be hungry," she said, guiding them to a table. "Sit. Eat first." Charles glanced at the food, humble, steaming, fragrant, and realized he hadn't known hunger until this night. Not the hunger of need, but the hunger of being cared for. As they ate, the woman, Mary, shared stories of her life. Stories of struggle, yes, but also of bravery. Of mornings spent at the workshop before dawn, evenings spent caring for her mother and her young son. Of fixing machines, of making ends meet, of choosing hope when life offered despair. Charles listened, captivated. Every word, every gesture, every smile carved a space in his heart he hadn't known existed. He had wealth, influence, all the city's lights at his fingertips, yet here, in the faint glow of a small fire and the warmth of a kind heart, he felt alive for the first time in years. Mary's son, James, peeped from behind the doorway, shy eyes wide. She introduced him gently, and Charles realized life's treasures were not counted in currency, but in courage, love, and kindness. "Rest here tonight," she said, "and tomorrow your car will be fixed. You will go on your way." Charles felt a weight lift, a storm inside him calming. The world he had ruled for years could wait. Here, in this quiet, humble home, he found a peace he had never known, a reminder that sometimes a single act of kindness can change the course of two lives forever. As he lay on the simple mattress, the hum of the night outside, and the gentle breathing of James in the next room, Charles. "When there seems to be none." Charles nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He had spent a life chasing wealth, yet here was a woman whose courage and kindness made his millions feel hollow. As the morning wore on, he helped her hold tools, handed her parts, and even managed to share small laughter. It was quiet, simple, yet it spoke louder than any contract or business deal ever could. They did not need words for the connection growing between them. It was felt in shared glances, in moments of trust, in the ease with which they moved together. When breakfast arrived, a simple meal of yam porridge and fresh fruit, Charles realized he hadn't felt at home in years. Not in the tallest skyscrapers, not in the finest hotels, but here, with Mary and James, surrounded by warmth and quiet laughter, he found a sense of belonging he never knew he had been missing. And so, in the silent rhythm of tools, meals, and shared mornings, love began to grow, subtle, steady, unannounced, yet impossible to ignore. It grew in moments of care, in quiet smiles, in unspoken understanding. Charles left that day with his car fixed, but his heart stayed behind in the little village, quietly tethered to a woman who had taught him that the richest hearts often live in the humblest places. And as he drove away, a soft breeze carrying the scent of earth and promise, he knew life had started a new chapter, and love, like the morning sun, had begun to rise in silence. In the city, behind the polished glass windows of a towering office, Jennifer sat perfectly still, her eyes sharp and cold as a frozen river. She watched Charles through the large window, unaware that he could never see her thoughts, but never realizing how deeply they would reach. She had been by his side for years, loyal, devoted, and unnoticed. And now he smiled, laughed even, when he spoke of a woman she had never met, a woman from a small village, a mechanic, someone with nothing but courage and kindness. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone. She had a plan, a way to turn the tide in her favor. "If I can't have him, no one will," she whispered, her voice soft but heavy with intent. The room seemed darker somehow, the air thick with envy. Meanwhile, Charles was oblivious to the storm brewing far away from the quiet village. His thoughts were still with Mary, the memory of her hands on the engine, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her home lingering in his heart. Each memory was a gentle tug, reminding him that some connections cannot be ignored, no matter the chaos of the world outside. Jennifer's first move was subtle, a call to someone who could dig into Mary's past. A few clicks, a few calls, and soon she had information she could twist into a story. She leaned back in her chair, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Let's see how strong your love is when shadows appear," she murmured. In the village, Mary was unaware of the lies that would soon cloud the path of her life. She went about her day, fixing engines, tending to her son James, and greeting neighbors with warmth. Her heart was light, yet a faint unease had begun to linger, little things she couldn't name, whispers in the wind she chose to ignore. But shadows have a way of finding light. And soon, the first seeds of doubt would be planted, carried by words twisted and eyes jealous, designed to make Charles question what he had come to trust. That night, the city lights twinkled like stars, But in Jennifer's apartment, a plan was set in motion. A single lie, she thought, could undo the bridge between two hearts. And as Charles slept far away in the village, dreaming of yesterdays and tomorrows with Mary, the world quietly shifted, poised to test the strength of love, courage, and truth. The winds of change were coming. And in the heart of both the city and the village, nothing would ever feel the same again. The morning sun rose slowly over the village, spilling golden light. Across the dusty roads and the small, humble workshop where Mary worked, the air smelled of wet earth, wood, and oil, a scent that carried memories of hard work, love, and simple joys. Charles arrived early, his car rolling gently onto the uneven path, but he didn't notice the luxury beneath his hands or the wealth behind his name. Today, his heart raced for something far more valuable than any contract or deal: the truth. Mary looked up from her work, her hands still streaked with grease, and met his gaze. "Charles, you're here again," she said softly, worry and hope dancing in her eyes. "I had to come," Charles said, voice trembling with a mix of fear and longing. "There are stories, lies, things I saw. I needed to hear it from you." Mary nodded, her breath catching in her chest. She had prayed for this moment, but it was heavy with tension. "Charles, there is nothing to hide. What you saw, it's not what it seemed," she whispered, stepping closer. He took a deep breath, the wind rustling through the mango trees, the same trees under which they had shared smiles, words, and quiet glances. "Tell me everything," he urged. "I need to know the truth. No secrets. No lies." Mary held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "The man you saw, he is James' father. He returned after many years because James asked about him. I never hid him out of shame, Charles. I hid him because I didn't want to scare you away, because I never wanted anyone else's past to steal what we began here." Charles's chest tightened, the weight of doubt and fear falling away slowly, replaced by understanding. The sun poured down on them, bathing the workshop in warmth, like a spotlight on a stage, illuminating honesty, courage, and heart. "I should have believed in you," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I let suspicion and shadows cloud what I felt. But now I see clearly." Mary reached out, her hands brushing his. "Charles, love is not in hiding. It grows in truth. You chose to be." Her hands brushing his. "Charles, love is not in hiding. It grows in truth. You chose to be here, under the sun, to hear me, and that is what matters." The city's chaos, the lies, the jealousy, all of it felt distant under the open sky. Here, in the light, the truth was simple, pure, and unshakable. Charles smiled, a smile that carried relief, joy, and a promise. "Mary, we can face anything now together." And for the first time, the village seemed to breathe with them, the wind whispering through the trees, the birds singing above, and the sun blessing the new beginning of a love that had endured doubt, fear, and deceit. The world was wide and full of challenges, but for now, under the open sun, hearts were open, and the truth had found its home. The sun had climbed high, painting long shadows across the village streets, when the ripple of truth began to reach those who had sown lies. Jennifer, once proud and certain, now felt the weight of her own schemes pressing down. She had tried to twist hearts and manipulate love, but the village seemed to murmur its own judgment, as if every tree and stone bore witness to her deeds. Charles, standing beside Mary in the warmth of the workshop, felt the tension dissolve. His eyes, once clouded with doubt, now shone with clarity. "Mary, your honesty, your courage, it saved us," he said softly, voice trembling with gratitude. Mary smiled faintly, brushing the grease from her hands. It is not just courage, Charles. Sometimes truth carries its own power. Sometimes those who try to break others find themselves broken instead. Far away, Jennifer's phone buzzed. Another message, another report. Every attempt she had made to manipulate, to control, now lay bare. Photos, messages, proof of her meddling, they were all circulating quietly among those who mattered. The very people she thought she could sway were now whispering of fairness, of balance, and of consequences. Her hand shook. "No, this cannot be," she whispered, realizing that the world had a way of balancing scales that human pride could never tip. Meanwhile, Charles had gathered the people from the village, friends, neighbors, and those who had heard of Mary's kindness. Under the open sky, he spoke, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. "There is no wealth or power greater than honesty. No scheme, no jealousy, can outshine the strength of a pure heart." The villagers nodded, eyes wide with awe and respect. They had seen kindness, perseverance, and integrity in Mary's actions. And now, justice, quiet but undeniable, was visible to all. Jennifer stood at the edge, her pride now humbled. She understood, finally, that love cannot be stolen, cannot be forced, and cannot be bought. It flourishes only where it is given freely. She lowered her gaze, her heart heavy with the truth she could not escape. Charles reached for Mary's hand, holding it firmly, as if anchoring the calm that had replaced the storm. "Let them whisper," he said. "Karma speaks, and we need only live honestly. That is the voice of justice." Mary squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of vindication. "Yes," she said softly. "Justice comes in many forms, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. But it always finds a way." As the sun dipped lower, painting the horizon with shades of gold and orange, the village seemed to breathe again, hearts lifted, lessons learned, and truth standing tall. Karma had spoken. Justice had found its voice. And those who had once sought to harm others now saw, in the light of day, the weight of their own choices. Under the African sky, the story of kindness, honesty, and love grew stronger, echoing in every corner of the village, promising that life, like the sun, would rise again for those who chose right over wrong. The first rays of dawn spilled over the village, soft and golden, touching every roof, every tree, every dusty path. Charles's car, once broken and stranded on that lonely road, now gleamed. Under the African sun, a quiet reminder of the journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty. Mary stood outside her workshop, wiping her hands on a rag, eyes scanning the horizon. For years, she had carried the weight of struggle, of doing what others could not, surviving when life seemed determined to push her down. Yet now, she felt something different, a lightness, a hope she had not dared to feel for a long time. Charles approached, his footsteps soft on the earth. He held a small envelope in his hand, but it was not the kind of gift that counted wealth. Inside were keys to a new beginning, a promise of dreams nurtured into reality. "Mary," he said, voice gentle, "we have rebuilt more than just a car. We've rebuilt trust, hope, and a future. This is just the beginning." Her heart trembled as she looked at him. "It feels strange," she admitted. "After all the storms, the lies, the fear, to feel peace again." "It is not strange," he replied, taking her hand. "It is life catching up to truth. Every hardship we faced, every fear we conquered, led us here." The villagers watched from a distance, seeing Mary and Charles stand together, hands intertwined, faces shining with resilience and love. They had witnessed the power of honesty, courage, and kindness. And now, under the open sky, they saw the reward, not in wealth, not in grandeur, but in a life restored, in hearts made whole. Mary smiled, looking down at her small son, James, who clung to her side. "He will know," she whispered, "that life can be rebuilt, no matter how broken the roads may seem." Charles looked at them, the sun warming his face. "And together," he said, "we will make sure that every road we travel leads to hope, and that every storm only makes us stronger." As they walked toward the workshop, hand in hand, the horizon seemed to stretch endlessly before them, golden, wide, and full of promise. The broken roads of yesterday had led them to this moment, a life rebuilt from kindness, courage, and love. The village, the sun, the trees, even the wind seemed to celebrate quietly, whispering across the fields. The journey may be long, the nights may be dark, but those who travel with honesty, heart, and hope will always find their way home. And in that gentle African dawn, a new chapter began, one not of wealth or power, but of life, rebuilt and shining bright. From broken roads to a life rebuilt, we learn that true wealth is not in gold or power, but in courage, kindness, and love. The storms may come, the lies may try to tear us down, but the heart that chooses hope will always find its way home. Remember, one small act of compassion can change a lifetime. What would you do if you were the one on that road?